Hello everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of the Ratliff Mandolins Weekly Production Diary. It is a bright, chilly Monday morning. First full week in December of 2022. And as many of you know, we are working on 10 mandolins and they're scattered back through here in the shell stage of the thing, basically this right here. I've got some in the prop bar deck, some waiting to go into the prop bar deck and have the tops glued on, and then some right over here that are going to run down this line of machines. In fact, hopefully they will all run down this line of machines this week. One to trim the edges off, clean them up, one to put the neck joint in, and this last machine right here will put in the F-holes, and then we're going to go to this bandsaw right here, saw the scroll out, keep headed this direction until we get to about where you're standing, to the stations where I put binding on, and I have the capacity of putting the binding on 3 tops at a time. So all of our efforts this week are going to be spent getting these mandolins down this line of machines right here to this stage or farther with the scroll cut, and we'll have, by the end of the week, we'll certainly have at least 3 of them on the binding stations, and my guess is we'll probably have more than that, but we'll just have to wait and see. So let's get started. Okay, a major milestone has been accomplished. Now the last 2 tops have been glued on. It is a nice rainy day here in Upper East Tennessee, and 2 sets of sides that are having the tops glued on in the prop bar deck. They've had plenty of time to dry, so I'm going to build a fire, take those out. I've got the rest of these mandolins scattered up and down through here in various stages of construction, so I'm going to start herding everything down this way. I'm just collecting mandolins as I go until I get them all at least as far as being ready to put the scroll on before I let maybe one run ahead of the others and get over here where we're starting the binding. So that will take a good portion of the day, actually, just gathering things up here, trimming the tops off of those, collecting what don't have the neck joint glued in, what doesn't have the F-holes glued in, and just bringing everything on down this way till we have them all here at least in one spot with 1 stage of construction. Well, I now have 10 bodies. They're all cleaned. Everything's been checked for square. They all have the scroll sawn into it, but not carved out. Everything is ready for those things to move on. The last thing that I'm going to do here, that's going to take some time to do, is all the fuzziness that's left by the machine around the F-holes. I'm going to take a brand new razor knife and a nice comfortable chair and sit by the stove and spend the rest of the day cleaning up these F-holes. And now all 10 of the mandolins have had their F-holes shaped, smoothed up to 120 grit. They might not be ready to shoot finish on just yet, but they're pretty much hump free and clean and just as pretty as they can be. So all 10 of those are done, and now I'm going to move on to carving the scrolls. We're going to rough that out and get that ready so that we can start the binding process on these things. I have here mandolin number 1. It is the first one that we're going to have on the binding station here. Mandolin number 1 is an R5 master model, and it's sort of an R5 master model plus because it's not only going to have 3-ply binding on the top, which will mean that we're going to have a wide outside white strip and inside black, white, black strip. But we're also going to have that on the sides here as well. So it's going to be double bound. And to make matters even more complicated, we're going to tie with the black, white, black strip the sides together so that each of these becomes a separately bound panel. So we'll get more into the details of that as we go along, but it's going to make this one a very complicated, time-consuming mandolin to bind, so I'm going to do it, or start on it first. And I bet you just cutting the binding channel and getting everything ready for those first pieces of binding will probably take the better part of the day. Here is a couple of shots of the double-ledged binding slot that has to be cut for a triple bound mandolin. I'm just going to move the light here, try to get some shadows so that you can see pretty good what it looks like. And indeed, cutting that slot did pretty much take care of the whole day, but we still have time enough to put the very first piece of binding on the very first mandolin in this batch. It's going to be the thin black, white, black that will go in that little auxiliary ledge, if you will, right there. And we'll bind the entire mandolin top with that. And then, and only then, will we go back and put the full regular piece of binding on. So we're going to get the very first piece of binding put on before the day's over with. And so now it is time for yet another milestone this week. I have made these tags up. They're just little tags like you see in a store sometimes. Little string on them and numbers and pertinent notes about the construction of some each mandolin. So this one would be for mandolin number 4, and it says it's going to have white binding. It has an internal pickup in it. It's going to have an A-style neck, and the logo is going to be in pearl. So these will be builder's notes that go with each of these mandolins as it goes through the construction stage. So right now, I'm going to lay out all of these mandolins and pick and choose and go through them. The main thing I think would be for mandolins number 7 and 8, we're wanting to make sister mandolins as close as possible with those. So I'll be looking at the top wood, and I'm going to try to pick 2 of these that have the closest grain similarities in the top wood and all like that, and those will be number 7 and 8. And a couple of these mandolins in this batch will have black binding, and so we'll be looking for the perfect mandolin for the custom features, if any. And this is actually a pretty straightforward batch, so it's not going to be any monstrous task to do this. And then when we've made our choice, that tag will go with that mandolin, and it'll follow it pretty much through the entire construction process until I put it in a box and put it on the truck and ship it out of here. So that's what I'm getting ready to do right now. Okay, I've made my choices. I've picked 2 that have pretty similar grain for number 7 and 8. And so those choices have been made. I'm going to pick up the camera. It might wiggle a little bit as we move here. 5 and 6, both of these right here are going to have a solid sunburst on them. And I have chosen, again, the bodies that we're going to make those mandolins out of, as well as number 3 and 4. A lot of these right here, about 3 or 4 of these mandolins in this batch are going to have solid, no sunburst. They're just going to have a brown stain on them or a light tan. That's number 3 and 4. Number 2, as you're aware, that number 1 is over there on the binding deck right now. And then for mandolins 9 and 10, they're going to be standard country boys, and we already have these 2 mandolins made from last batch They're just extras that were left over, so we're probably going to try to use those. But if something happens here and these don't work out, then we've got 2 extra bodies that we've made. And so now we're going to affix the tags to each of these mandolins. Put everything back in a box except for the first 2, or actually the second and the third one, number 2 and 3, because as you know, number 1 is over there now having its binding put on. We're going to go and start with number 2 and 3 and start the binding process on those, put everything else up, and then just start feeding them in as they come out of the binding process, feeding more in until we get them all bound and ready to go. And so by the week's end, mandolin number 1 has the first 3 pieces of binding glued on it. Mandolin number 2, it's going to have black binding, and it has its first piece of binding glued on. And mandolin number 3 is just getting started. And so I'd like to say thank you so very much for staying with me for the whole video. Look forward to seeing you next week on the next episode of Ratliff Mandolin's weekly production diary. See you then. Bye. Hit the like and subscribe button, please, and leave a comment. And we'll see you next week.